The following program is for informational and educational purposes only. This program does not replace medical, mental health, or psychological diagnosis and treatment prescribed by your personal physician, psychologist, therapist, or other healthcare provider. Please consult your provider for diagnosis and care before beginning or changing any program or idea discussed.
Welcome to Psych Up Live with your host, Dr. Suzanne Phillips. This is the show that brings you a psychological perspective on common and current life issues. Here is Dr. Suzanne Phillips.
Welcome. Thanks for joining me again on Psych Up Live. Today, I'm privileged to be joined by Geoffrey Grief and Victoria Stubbs, who will be discussing their new and very important book, Interracial Marriage: How Diverse Couples Navigate Relationships in a Divided Time. This book was written by Jeff, Victoria, and their other colleague, Michael Wooley. In it, they offer an insider look at interracial marriage based on personal interviews and surveys with people married to someone of a different race or ethnicity than their own. From family acceptance to rejection, from unexpected inclusion to the joys and challenges of raising multiracial or bi-ethnic children, they will offer a realistic understanding of the challenges, sources of intervention, and reasons to trust in the resilience of love and connection. Geoffrey Grief is a return guest to Psych Up Live. His earlier book was on in-law relationships. He's a distinguished university professor emeritus and a clinical social worker. As the author and editor of 17 books and over, if you can believe this, 175 articles and book chapters, his focus has been on family relationships and friendships. Victoria Stubbs has over 25 years' experience as a social worker, educator, holistic practitioner, and author. She's the founder of Inner Truth Psychotherapy and Wellness and FIT Coaching and Consulting. In addition to this book on interracial marriage, Victoria is the author of another book, Untangled: A Black Woman's Journey to Personal, Spiritual, and Sexual Freedom. Geoffrey Grief and Victoria Stubbs, it is my privilege to welcome you both to Psych Up Live.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So let's start out. When we talk about diverse couples, we're speaking about two groups. Can we distinguish those two groups?
Yes, our book is based on extensive research, both 150 personal interviews with, and also a survey of people across the country of more than 400 folks involved in either an interracial or an interethnic marriage. They could be involved in both an interracial and interethnic. And we want to make clear that when we talk about interethnic marriages, we're talking about what the Census Bureau considers an ethnicity. So they have a box that you check. You are either Hispanic/Latino or you are not Hispanic/Latino. So we specifically are using that as an intermarriage. Somebody who is Hispanic who's married to a non-Hispanic would be considered an interethnic marriage. And of course, we're talking about interracial marriage too. That includes the 5 races that are identified by the Census Bureau: Asian Americans, Black Americans, Native American, tribal folks, Pacific Rim folks, and white folks, the intermarriage of these different races.
Okay. Now, we know that interracial and interethnic marriages require a new definition of self on the part of either partner. And of course, the children may have another identity, a different one in some way than their parents. Let's talk a little bit about how does that unfold, and does it create problems or expand the positives in the situation? Victoria, what would you say?
Yeah, that's a layered one, as you were just saying, because I would think off the top, just from an identity standpoint, I wouldn't say that it creates a problem, but it does create complexity, meaning that, like you started off saying, the child has a different identity than both parents from a racial standpoint, right? And so what we found in our research is that most of the couples wanted their children to figure out for themselves how they identified, particularly the younger couples, um, because they recognize the significance of them having that identity. And so that's why it's not so much that it's a problem, but it's a complexity, because if one parent is Black American and the other one is Asian American, right, then clearly they have both. But the child, how they see themselves in the world, right, may not be the same way that a parent would just identify. Or even like what Jeff was just saying about the boxes, right? People often don't fit neatly in one of those census boxes. And so they would then have to figure out which box, right, makes sense. Even as in it starts at school, the school age, right? Like there are schools that will just classify a child based upon what they look like, what their parents look like, which parent comes to the school most, right? And so the school could just choose, right? Even if it doesn't match how the child sees themselves and identifies. And so what we saw is that the parents wanted to have that space for their child to sort of figure that out while also understanding, right, that like you are actually both. And how do we uplift that so that you connect with both?
So my favorite story related to that is, so there's two little brothers. The dad is Black, the mother's white, and the school has decided the older brother's Black and the little one is white. So the dad says to the wife, "What should I do?" She said, "Ask him." So he yells up to the little brother, "The school has your brother listed as Black and they have you listed as white. What do you want?" "Whatever," says the little kid, which is to me such a wonderful answer because it's
Hmm.
not a big deal to him. But
Hmm.
it's exactly what you said, Victoria.
Hmm.
Outside labels being put on, sometimes
Yeah,
indiscriminately,
yeah.
but kids are wonderful.
Yeah.
It's,
And
it's
so
from,
the complexity of it that also comes up in the conversation though is that it starts off because as children, like you just said, it's wonderful. That's not really the thing.
yes,
But what we know about the state of the world is that it does actually matter, right?
yeah,
Because how one brother moves through the world may very well be different than how the other brother moves through the world because
absolutely,
right? How he's seen and also how he sees himself. And so as children get older, that's usually where the fear comes in for the parents, is around sort of now how are they going to be treated though?
absolutely,
What do they have to
absolutely.
prepare for? And given that, our book really, the research took place, during an era in this country where there was a lot of upheaval, racial upheaval,
Hmm.
revolution, right, between 2020 and 2025, we parents know for sure that Black boys are treated differently, period. And so
Absolutely.
as we get older, that's where the additional complexity comes in because we still have to prepare children for how the world is going to see you.
I had a colleague, and he had teenage sons that were the same age as my teenage sons. And one day he said to me, "I am so anxious." And he works in the field in a complicated situation where he's terrific. He runs a program. And he said, "Do you know what it means, the hum of fear?" I said, "I'm not sure." He said, "Well, it was last night, it was really rainy, and I knew my son was going to go through Central Park.
Mm,
And I called him and I said, 'Do not put your hoodie up
mhm,
and do not run,
mhm,
because a Black kid running with a hoodie is
mhm,
someone that someone's going to think you did something wrong.'" And I got this feeling, oh my God, I knew that my sons were rollerblading in Central Park at 11 o'clock at night sometimes, and there wasn't any need for fear.
Yeah.
But this really gripped me in terms of what you're saying,
Yeah.
of the fear that goes with, how people were being treated and how stereotypical some of this treatment and abuse was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And one of the things we talk about in the book in relation to that exact issue is that, of course, monoracial children who are children of color, who are minoritized, parents have to teach those children how to deal with the world. And they're coming from a perspective that may be more closely aligned than, and I'll use the black-white example here, than a black parent and a white parent who are coming at raising their children with different racial histories, and they
Yeah.
have to talk more and figure out more about how do we talk to them, and how often does, for example, a white father of a mixed race black white child have to feel that he needs to bring in a black man to help his son, who is going to be perceived as black in many environments. And
Wow, that's interesting.
how do you talk about that as an interracial couple when your experience as an Asian American is different than your experience as a white person, as a black person? And in addition to what Victoria was saying, there's a lot of stuff in the atmosphere in terms of Asian Americans around COVID, obviously, Hispanic Americans around what's happening with the border and people's perception, and Black Americans in terms of what's happened with Black Americans being killed. And so all those things are happening at the same time. And people have to figure out, well, how do we talk about this between each other? And then how do we work with our children when we're coming at this from different perspectives, and our children may not look like either of us?
Yep.
And
And this,
I'll add, if I can add a little bit, I would add in
sure.
Muslim to that distinction as well. Because with some of the clients that I've worked with, um, the Muslim identity, right? Even if you identify as Muslim, you may be not classified racially. You may be racially classified as Black, but
Right.
ethnically you're Muslim, right?
Okay.
So
Yes.
again, we know that's why the title is so significant in a divided time, because like Jeff was just saying, there's so many stereotypes and aggressions, microaggressions towards these different groups, that some of my clients have literally considered moving because they're raising a Black boy in America. And they're like, I don't want my Black son, the threat, like you said, that the fear
The
underneath,
homophobia. Yeah.
the hum of fear, they've considered leaving the country specifically
Wow.
so that they can raise their child in a safer environment. So, and so these conversations around, I actually was just having a conversation with an interracial couple about their son is getting ready to go into school. And we're starting to have those conversations, and it came up in therapy, and it was just like, oh, this is exactly what we're talking about, of like the considerations, because the mom, who was white, was thinking about the educational part, like which school is better, what kind of educational experience, etc. The dad, who's Black, was thinking, who who had an all white school experience, was thinking, what kind of experience do I want my biracial child to have? Because now the child is biracial, the parents are not, but both are coming from different perspectives on what they're thinking about as it relates to school, for their, like, what kind of environment, right? Well, one is thinking about safety, the other is thinking about educational pursuits. And the wife ended up saying that she had never thought about it. She didn't know, this was like really their first time really starting to talk about it. And she hadn't thought about it from her husband's perspective, because why would she, as a white person in America, right, think about that? Whereas he clearly
Yes.
was thinking about
Yes.
safety, and safety, and also just identity.
I love the term you used, throughout the book of perspective taking, and that sometimes one of the benefits of counseling or therapy of some time is the illumination of the perspectives and really what people are seeing and not seeing. It's interesting. That father was the sole Black young man in an all-white school. That in and itself is a story that he carries. But it's very interesting about the best of someone's life is usually the children, but the children do awaken issues that a couple don't take on or never have to take on if they don't have them. So the question that then comes up is, sometimes it seemed like the children were little and the parents were so eager, to tell them, do you remember Leo? Leo, you're Asian, you're Black, you're something else. And what do you want to be? I want to be Leo. So sometimes they're so eager, obviously, to try to get this across that it's happening early, but at least we know it's going to happen, and Leo's going to eventually understand that. Let's talk a little bit about the impact of in-laws, the impact when someone goes home and says, I'm planning on marrying Jake. He's Asian. I'm planning on marrying Mike. He's a Black man. And what that does in terms of the couple's relationship and the future interpersonal relating that happens in the family. What have you seen, and what is it that the book sort of helps us with in terms of that?
Jeff, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll take a first crack at that. We found usually is the way I want to phrase that according to our research, both from the interviews and from the surveys, that immediate family members are, for the most part, accepting. There's not a lot of pushback from immediate family members, mothers, fathers, siblings in that immediate home. But as you move out into further cousin-related areas, you are more likely to encounter people that are less comfortable with the notion of intermarriage than are the immediate family, which makes sense because the person who has decided to intermarry maybe has factored in the support from parents and support from siblings and the support from friends.
Right.
That being said, there are, and this is for in part who the book is written, there were a significant minority, maybe 15% of those who felt they were definitely not accepted by either their own parents or their in-laws. And we want to step back for a minute and say that most of these marriages are doing very well. And we consider these couples a triumph and a role model.
Absolutely.
How society can move forward. At the same time, they have maybe managed their life in a way, they've learned to manage it in a way to avoid getting into trouble or getting into situations that will make them feel uncomfortable. So they've made adjustments. Many of these couples have made adjustments about where they live and who they're going to socialize with. And that includes their family, which was the door we came in through. So you may have people that say to their spouse, you know what, I'm going to stay home this holiday. You go and hang out with your parents. I don't like Uncle Joe or Aunt Mary. And so they just won't go along. Or they have signals with each other that if things get tough, we're sort of going to exchange glances and move away from this person or this situation. So I think these families are doing very well. They are, though, often on guard to some extent as to what they may get. The further they move in the family circle, but away from their immediate family.
I've even seen that in my practice, and that's where I see they actually problem solve very well and often go alone to the different family holidays. But once there are grandchildren involved, the story changes. So then all of a sudden, all's forgiven, and or we cannot resist this grandchild.
Mhm.
And so things get a little bit better. But there's often still, I mean, I'm with you. I think it takes quite a bit of resilience to hold on to the marriage, to, not blow up every family holiday, and to really problem solve. And people, they're very smart couples very often. They've decided they love each other enough to step outside of the bounds of what society thinks is the way it should be. So they're often kind of smart and resilient and independent. They don't need a choir, at their wedding. If it's the two of them, it's the two of them.
Mhm.
So, but it's very interesting, um, the way you say it. This is where, in a way, Victoria, you point out the importance of, if people can get support, whether it's a group or individual couple therapy. Sometimes, if it's not working out, I think it's the story of the man when she would invite neighbors over, he would never be there.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And maybe share that example of, he never told her why until
Yeah.
they came to you.
Yeah. And so before I say that, I just want to, the
Okay,
thing that
sure.
came to mind was about proximity, and what you're talking about, even with the grandchildren, is that what we found was that couples whose immediate families were already in a closer proximity to a diverse people, groups of people, that
Okay.
made it easier because
Ah, yeah,
we're already familiar. We have friends that are of different backgrounds.
perfect.
We are maybe already dating. Like it may be already in our zeitgeist. So the
Yeah,
proximity makes a difference. And so to Jeff's point, the further folks got away from that in their family, even, that's the part that adds, that makes it a little bit murky, right? Where the grandparents may not be in proximity to
yes,
groups, and so they're the ones who may be having struggling, or friends who aren't, so the proximity
yes.
makes a difference. And so the story that you're referencing that we talk about in the book is sort of similar, right? Where like the husband had been in proximity to white people in a negative way, and that story had not been shared with his wife, who was white, who had been in proximity with white people in a positive way. And
Mhm.
so in the therapy space, um, oftentimes things are, like you said, are brought to life in that space. And even though it's couples may share the same story, you hear it differently in therapy.
Yes.
And so it can land different, and the therapist can help touch on what's the underpinning of this story that makes it significant to your experience. And so it then can illuminate that, like, oh, I had a negative experience with white neighbors. That's why I'm not interested in becoming friends with white neighbors today. And so then when the wife hears it, she's like, oh, I didn't know that piece. And so when I ask, have you heard this before? Oftentimes is, well, I sort of knew this story, but I didn't realize the connection to what we're experiencing in our relationship. And so
Mm.
therapy can help with that, because I'm curious and I'm asking questions to help the couple make the connections as to why this is significant.
What's so interesting in couple therapy and in this area of multiracial issues, um, different ethnicities, people have the same fight over and over again.
Mhm.
But very often the story that's generating their position is not revealed. And
Correct.
the aha moment
Correct.
is so important in their life going forward, which
Yeah,
is why, as you say, in the part about the group couple therapy, perspective taking, the story behind the action.
that's right.
If one person says, I'm never going to show up with your parents, but the other doesn't know why, that's a very different dynamic in a marriage than if they say, well, now I understand why you wouldn't show up.
Right. Right.
It changes from resistance to empathy.
That's right. That's right.
And so it seems to be really important, especially when you're brave enough to marry someone you love, even though the world is not glowing about it.
100%. 100%. And it requires a level of vulnerability to share those stories. And so that's why, and I know we can talk about this more later, the 6 pillars of a brave space, because you use the word bravery, right, is so significant because it does require bravery to share those stories that are often very painful memories, which is why we don't lead with them, but they're significant stories to who you are married to.
Yes.
Right? To
Yes.
understand why you move the way that you move. So the vulnerability and perspective taking are part of the pillars that are required to have these kinds of conversations.
Yes. We so much wanted to get away from pathology. It's
Right,
not about pathology.
right.
It's about understanding your history and finding the words to explain it to your partner. It's very
Yep,
different than, you're crazy,
That's
we
right.
got to go get help.
That's
It's
right.
not that at all.
That's right.
It's not that at all.
That's right.
Oh, okay, we're gonna have to take a break. I want to thank you again. We're here with Geoffrey Grief and Victoria Stubbs, their new book, Interracial Marriage: How Diverse Couples Navigate Relationships in a Divided Time. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Psych Up Live with host Dr. Suzanne Phillips offers a psychological perspective on coping with common and current life issues. This show addresses topics as varied as marital stress, insomnia, depression, raising teens, campus violence, and building self-resilience. Listen in as Dr. Phillips and her guest experts share the latest in books, findings, and information that will inform and enhance your life journey. Psych Up Live is heard every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Tune in to the Voice America Variety Channel on the Voice America Talk Radio Network. Voice America Variety broadcasts a diverse array of topics, reaching a global community. Our experts come from all walks of life, and the topics they discuss are everything from current events, arts and entertainment, leadership, parenting, relationships, self-improvement, career advice, and a variety of other topics. Check us out today. You're sure to find something of interest. Voice America Variety. Talk on today's hot topics.
are listening to Psych Up Live. Join in our conversation today. Send an email to radiohostphillips@gmail.com. Now, back to Psych Up Live.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to Psych Up Live. We're here talking about interracial marriage, how diverse couples navigate relationship in a divided time. Our guest experts are Geoffrey Grief and Victoria Stubbs. And we were just about to start bringing up a little bit more about the topic of children and how they fare in this situation and what they bring that's positive to the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there are a range of reactions that we heard about from the people that we interviewed. Very often the children do not look like mixed race children, do not look like either parent. So it would not be atypical, for example, a Black woman married to a white man to be out with a lighter skinned child than she is, and people mistook her for being a nanny or a child care person. And with the same couple, it would not be unusual for a white man with a mixed race son to be seen as being a mentor or a coach, and that's why they were together. So these sorts of microaggressions that happened were fairly common. And consider the fact that a mixed race child is neither the race of the parent in most cases or of either parent. So you have an issue where you have people who look very different from parents. And you also have possibly siblings of the same parents who do not look the same. So there's a lot of
Right.
questioning or looking at that these parents reported to us that they had received. And that just made parenting, especially in stressful situations like you're going into the emergency room because your child has broken their leg on their
Yeah.
bicycle, and all of a sudden you've got another layer of this. You open up the show with the discussion about the couple that was raising the kid, and the kid hadn't sort of decided on the kid's race, but it was very important to the parents, one of the parents, that they do decide.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that can happen. The other thing that happens with children is that as they age, they may begin to push their parents more. They're on social media, their friends, their teenage peers are on social media, and they come home and they start to push their parents about stuff. Why don't we take part in this march? Why have we decided to vacation here instead of there? We need to talk more. And the final point to make at this point is that children, as they develop, may change racial identities. They may decide they are one race at one point, and then they start to hang out with a peer group that is accepting of that or not accepting of that. And that may cause them to question, what is my racial identity? I'm not Asian American enough. I'm not white enough. I'm not Black enough to associate with any one group. And these are some of the things that we heard from parents.
It's interesting. It sort of means that the children become touch points that necessitate the parents expanding their understanding of their marriage and the family that they're raising. And the children have the voices and the perspective that they would never have if they didn't have children. It's
That's a
very
great
interesting.
point. That's a great
Yeah.
point. And this is where the parents' own racial history becomes so important, because that is going to come into the discussions between each other and with their child.
Yes. Wow.
And
Yeah.
it all highlights how much race is a construct, even just in the description that Jeff was giving and what y'all are talking about. It really highlights how race in and of itself is a construct. The fact that he was saying, like, it can change, and like they will change, and like when you ask, like, which, like, it's so, and that's what makes it so complicated a lot of times, is because it's really not real in many ways. And so what the children, and yet it is a real experience, right? And so what the children elevate is how we have to, have these conversations to figure out, how are we, like you said at the beginning, our family now has a different identity, right? And we now have to figure out what that is.
Mhm.
And to Victoria's point about the social construct, my daughter, who is white, I'm married to a white woman. My daughter's white. She married a man who identifies as white. His parents are both Egyptian. And the Census Bureau is giving great consideration to adding a new racial category of Middle Eastern North African. MENAS is the acronym.
Oh, yes, yes. That's right.
So she was in a monoracial marriage, and when that change comes through, all of a sudden she's in an interracial marriage, married to the same guy. My grandchildren, of which there are two of that marriage, go from being white to being mixed race, all because of some decision made in Washington.
Boom.
Wild. That's a it's so wild. I can't even comment on it. Oh wow. So the other piece of this, and the one that we want to pick up is, how do you recommend, as and maybe this fits with your daughter, or this fits with the couples you work with, Victoria, what approach do you take with parents who are saying now are very, very anxious? He
Mhm.
wants to say be with this group. He
Mhm.
wants to deny the fact that he's multiracial. He's very light, and he doesn't want to say it. Say it. He doesn't. Has all white friends, or the reverse.
Mhm.
So, how do you approach the parents on that dilemma when they come to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I normalize that there is such a thing as racial identity. Like there is a theory of racial identity. There is a process for folks going through sort of stages of racial identity development. And so I try to normalize that so that they know that this is not like a unique thing to your child. There's nothing wrong with them. But when you're a racialized person, there is a journey that you go on, right, to really figure out for yourself who you are and how to be that. And so I really start from that sort of psychoeducational
Nice.
standpoint so that they understand that like this is a thing, the same way that we go through a toddler, teenage, young adult, right? Like we go through these different changes as it relates to understanding who we are. Because
Mm,
to Jeff's point, maybe the parent didn't necessarily have the exact same kind of experience of that. One parent might have, one parent might not have,
right.
right? And so
Right.
understanding that now your child is having a even different experience because they really do have to navigate these sort of two or three worlds.
Mm. The other thing you, I think, hint at in the book with the perspective taking is just to have the parents take in what the teenage is saying without us having to come to a decision. So, what are we going to do? And what are we going to call ourselves? That isn't even needed because this is an ongoing story.
An ongoing
So,
story.
but just to know that the child is wary about it or a little confused about it, it's like anything else. If you say that you're afraid, um, and you're in an elevator that's locked, and you say to your child, "Yeah, I'm a little bit afraid too." I think they're going to come, but we're here. It's the same background object,
Yeah,
being a background object for the kids. But I think there's brilliance often in what teens say that drive parents crazy. I
yeah,
think there's often, we just did a program on anorexia and eating disorder, and the biggest message was stay close, listen. You don't have to have a magic solution, offer that companionship. And
yeah.
that's really what you just said, which is terrific, really
Yeah,
terrific.
and the other piece that I would add into that too is leaning into again the parent offering up in an age appropriate way how to share what their concerns are, like you just mentioned, and what the reality is. That the kid doesn't see that reality because we're seeing it from an adult's reality, right? And so, as a preparation for being in the world, right, sort of how to talk to your child about like what the concerns are, like you were saying about walking around with a hood on, being out at night, like, when the police come, or like when you're with a group of friends, like these are all things that we have to talk about in an age appropriate way in general, now we're just adding in the layer of the reality of race and how that also shows up.
Yeah, beautifully said. So then the next point that we mentioned we wanted to deal with is the media and how it brings in every type of horror that's going on everywhere and how much that impacts families, definitions, levels of anxiety. You mentioned, the George Floyd situation,
Mhm,
and what that means then racially and personally to the spouse who is Black, as opposed to the partner who never gave the police a thought or never gave this kind of behavior a thought.
mhm,
So the question is, how do we help families, couples deal with what never stops on the media lately?
mhm, mhm. Well, I'll start there because this, the research that we did was during, like we said, 2020 to 2025, and it was the media, but it was also the politics going on, and we're all also inundated with the politics all
Yeah,
the time, right? So I'm grouping those together because oftentimes what have heard is that what's been going on in the media and in our society, particularly around the violence and the racism, was elevated during that time, right? And so to your point, if I've never had to, and this combines with the kids too, because one of the examples that came up in the book was a white mom who, because of what she was seeing on TV, was constantly wanting to process it and talk about it with her family, her Black husband, Black son. And the son, a teenager, as well as the husband, they were like you're all of a sudden now wanting to talk about this when we've been talking about it and we've been aware of it for years. And you're just now catching up. And so for them, it was sort of like, can you step back a little bit because you're now
yeah, yeah.
overwhelmed. It's overwhelming to us because we live it every day. We're aware of
Oh,
it.
wow.
But even in the same home, the mom was sort of new to this perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
So they have to be able to navigate that sort of one parent being like, I'm all in, I want to know more, which is an opportunity, right? However, it can have an overwhelming impact on the person. And there's something that we talk about in the book called minority stress, right?
Okay.
Like the person who's the minoritized person has the stress of dealing with the fear and the inundation and all the things all the time, right? On top of needing to now educate a white person or a person of a different race. Now I need to educate you on what's going on, why it's happening, da, da, da. That's stressful and it's a lot. And it's really unique to minoritized people because of the way that, when we talk about white privilege or male privilege and things like that, that's really what we're talking about. Like the
Yeah,
privilege is that you don't really have to worry about the police coming
right.
after you or your son or what have you, but we have to think about that and be aware of it every day, right? And
Hmm.
so the killing of George Floyd just really put a spotlight and it brought it into people's view in
Yeah,
a major way. But then at the same time, the era of Trump and what came with that also sort of came to the surface and put one of the things that really struck me with the research was that, like you mentioned at the beginning, the fear and violence that is in our zeitgeist because it's been sort of given permission to be there, which means that
yeah,
couples have to move differently because it's people are more vocal and more upfront with their racism.
mm. And it's somewhat, when you listen to the news and you think about ICE, for instance, I mean, even older couples tell me we're carrying our passports with us. We're terrified all the time. These are professional people who are, comfortable here for many, many years.
Mhm.
Um, so the question becomes, how do you regulate the anxiety so that you and your children are not in a state of, you know, high-powered anxiety all the time? How do you create safe places? as well as stay informed.
Yeah. One of the couples that talked about that in particular, her partner, she was a woman of color, married to a white guy, and she talked about the threats and physical violence that he experienced because he was with her, and other white people didn't like that he was with a woman of color. And so, to your point of the safety, they then started shopping at a different grocery store.
Good
They,
for them.
they
Yeah.
started going to a grocery store that was more ethnically diverse, that she was more, but said she felt more comfortable going to a more diverse neighborhood where there was ethnic grocery stores, et cetera, because it was literally a threat going to the grocery store, because of their relationship. And so those are the types of those are the types of decisions that couples have to make. And oftentimes what we heard too was that they're making those types of decisions in general. Like they're often thinking about, where do we want to live that feels comfortable, that's welcoming, that's affirming to the fact that we are an interracial or interethnic couple. So a lot of the couples talked about that's just sort of at the forefront for them anyways. And then for those where it may not have been as easy to do, it became an issue because of what was going on in
Mhm.
the culture.
Let me ask you this because we're almost running out of time. I get the feeling that the couples that were part of the study benefited from being in the study.
I
What do
think
you
well,
think?
I think people tend to like to talk about themselves
Yeah,
in
yeah,
in general, and I think that when you are interviewed by someone who knows what they're doing, and we had our social work students who were well trained, very sympathetic, very empathetic, finding people that they could talk to who were feeling comfortable enough about their own feelings and their own experiences to kind of explain what was going on. And a little of this goes back to the point that you were both just making, that people have figured out how to organize their life to make it work. And a lot of that, sometimes if they can't do it themselves, that's when they come in to see a therapist like Victoria, who has a very clear set of steps that people can go through when they come
great.
in for therapy, that we discuss in one of the chapters in the book.
Yeah, good, great. So, if I were to ask you each to give our listeners a take-home message from this important show, what would it be?
Ooh,
Victoria?
just one.
You
Um,
can give two.
um, I think as a therapist, as a social worker, I'm often thinking about, and someone who educates social workers, I'm often thinking about them. And so, what I would say, particularly from a clinical standpoint, for the therapists or social workers first, I would say to not be afraid to bring up race because it's already in the room.
Yep.
And I say that because we as a profession still struggle, and as a country,
Yeah.
still struggling with how to talk about, race, power, and privilege. And I hope that this, particularly the section on the 6 pillars of a brave space, can be a guide to help people have something to hold on to help them to navigate these different difficult conversations, because we're often made to feel uncomfortable about talking about something that already exists. Like it's already there. And it doesn't mean that you're racist if you, as a therapist, or if you bring it up because you're looking at it, right? And you know that it's impacting them. They know that it's impacting them. So it's okay to acknowledge it because it has
Mhm.
to be acknowledged because it's already there.
Okay.
2:57 p.m.
I think for me, one of the things that we could really spend another whole session on here with you, Suzanne. You've been doing such a great job of getting us to talk about the book, is the issue of the intersection of race and gender, that we haven't really looked at what's it like to be an Asian American man married to a white woman or a black woman? What's it like for a white man to be married to an Asian American woman? What are the tropes that we have around intermarriage? Historically, what has pushed people's buttons into racial rage against couples, against people of color, but against everybody is seeing a is seeing a black man with a white woman. That there's so much history around that, but it also involves Asian American women with men, Asian American men, Latinos. We haven't yet really talked a lot here today about what about a language barrier.
Yeah.
If I'm
Okay.
married to an Asian American woman and I can't, or Asian American man, and I can't communicate with her or his or their parents, what does that do? And the same
Yes.
thing is if I'm
Okay.
not fluent in Spanish.
Okay. I want to thank both of you from coming on, for coming on, and I want to ask, where can people find your book?
Amazon, I guess.
Okay.
Yep,
All
Amazon,
right.
Columbia University Press, Target, all the
Right.
places. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We could do another whole show. That's how much is in it, and we didn't even get to the pillars. The book, whether you don't have to be a therapist to read this book, but it's eye-opening and beautifully written. You'll enjoy it. I want to thank my listeners. Remember, you can hear this and any of the shows on Voice America Media and on all the platforms, Apple Podcast, iTunes, iHeart. Until next week, thank you. Be safe and be listening.
Thank you for tuning in to Psych Up Live. Please join Dr. Suzanne Phillips for another edition of our programming next Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Variety Channel. Until then, be well and be listening.